Tucked away in the New Testament, there's a scene that feels less like ancient scripture and more like a modern political drama. It's this moment of raw, public confrontation between two absolute titans of the early church. One apostle calls out another right to his face for behavior he says is threatening the very heart of the gospel.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The man Paul's confronting here, Cephas, that's just the Aramaic name for the Apostle Peter. And this is not some friendly disagreement. Paul says Peter was self-condemned. This one verse has literally sparked centuries of debate, and it's right at the center of a huge challenge to Catholic teaching.
For a lot of people, this event is held up as the ultimate silver bullet, a kind of open and shut case against the Catholic doctrines of papal authority and infallibility. So today, let's unpack that claim. We're going to look at the arguments and the counter-arguments that the source material lays out. All right, so to really get why this is considered a silver bullet, we first need to understand what exactly happened in that ancient city of Antioch. Let's set the scene for this historic clash. So picture this. Peter was practicing what he preached. He was eating with Gentile Christians, showing that they were full members of the new community. But then, a group of more traditional Jewish Christians shows up, and suddenly, Peter pulls back. He stops eating with the Gentiles, and that created a massive problem. His actions sent this powerful, unspoken message that the Gentile believers were somehow second class, and Paul saw this as a direct attack on the truth of the gospel.
So what's really interesting here is how the objection is built. The logic is pretty straightforward, right? The Bible itself records the man believed to be the first pope making a serious error. An error so bad it led other people astray and required him to be corrected in public. So the question becomes, if the very first pope was fallible and could be wrong, how can the entire idea of an infallible papacy possibly be true?
To understand the Catholic response to this really powerful objection, we first have to get crystal clear on what the Church actually teaches about papal infallibility. And as it turns out, it might just be one of the most misunderstood doctrines in all of Christianity. Okay, so the crucial thing to get here is that infallibility isn't some superpower. It's not a blanket protection over everything a pope says or does. It's an extremely specific and limited gift that only applies when all three of these very strict conditions are met at the same time. It's basically a guarantee that the Church will be protected from officially teaching something that's wrong about its core beliefs. And this slide right here illustrates the most common mix-up. The objection often confuses infallibility with impeccability. Infallibility is about being protected from teaching error. It's a gift tied to the office of the papacy. Impeccability, on the other hand, means being sinless, a state of personal holiness. They're two totally different things. And let's be super clear on this. The Catholic Church has never claimed that popes are sinless, not once. In fact, if you look at Catholic history, it's full of popes who were deeply flawed, sinful men. The claim is about the divine protection of the Church's formal teaching, not about the personal character of the man who happens to be pope. All right, so with those definitions in mind, let's go back to that showdown in Antioch and look at it through a new lens. Was what Peter did a doctrinal error, or was it something else entirely?
Paul's own words kind of give us the answer. He never accuses Peter of teaching false doctrine. He doesn't say, "Peter, your theology is wrong." Instead, he confronts him for failing to live up to the truth that Peter himself already knew and believed. It was a failure of courage, not a failure of creed.
And if you dig into the original Greek, it's incredibly revealing. Paul's language is all about action and behavior. He calls it hypocrisy, basically a failure to act in line with what you believe. He says they weren't walking a straight course. This is the language of personal conduct, of fear and hypocrisy, not the language of a formal dogmatic declaration of faith.
As one source puts it so well, Peter's poor judgment about who to eat lunch with just doesn't come close to meeting the strict criteria for an infallible act. It wasn't a definitive proclamation on faith or morals that was meant to bind the entire Church.
So, the crucial point of the Catholic response is this: that silver bullet objection, it's not actually hitting the real target. It's attacking a caricature, a straw man version of infallibility that Catholic teaching has never, ever supported in the first place.
Okay, so maybe Peter's action doesn't touch infallibility, but what about his authority? Doesn't getting publicly called out prove he wasn't really the leader? Well, this is where the counterargument gets fascinating. It completely flips the script.
So instead of seeing this as a moment that diminishes Peter, the argument is that this confrontation was such a massive deal precisely because Peter was such a big deal. His leadership status is the very thing that made the whole event so important.
Think about it. Peter's bad example was so powerful that it immediately caused other Christians, even another apostle, Barnabas, to follow him in his hypocrisy. Paul didn't go after Barnabas. He went straight to the source, to the person whose actions carried the most weight. He tells this story to make a critical point. The truth of the gospel stands above everyone, even the chief apostle.
And get this isn't just a Catholic talking point. This quote is from a highly respected biblical commentary written by Protestant scholars. They argue that the intense focus on Peter's failure actually emphasizes his top dog status. If he wasn't the recognized leader, his actions just wouldn't have mattered that much.
So, after digging into the objection and the detailed response, what are the key takeaways from this ancient, really complex theological showdown? In a nutshell, this entire debate really hinges on defining our terms very carefully. It's all about separating a leader's personal behavior from their official teaching role. The argument is that Peter's sin of cowardice doesn't cancel out the protection promised to his office, and that the sheer drama of the event actually points to his unique authority.
Ultimately, what this interpretation gives us is a vision of an institution that's believed to be divinely guided in its core teaching, even when its human leaders are flawed and make serious personal mistakes. It's all about that distinction between the man and the office he holds.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. This ancient biblical fight raises a question that echoes down to the centuries and applies to way more than just theology. It forces all of us to think about that complicated relationship between leadership, personal weakness, and the nature of authority in any institution.